The conference room aboard the Coalition starship Unity's Promise hummed with quiet tension. Captain Arya Chen sat among 15 alien officers, her human frame small compared to the towering figures around the table. She adjusted her tablet, trying not to feel overwhelmed by the sea of scales, fur, and crystalline skin surrounding her. General Vorath stood at the head of the table, his 4 arms gesturing at the holographic display floating above them. The Crethean fortress rotated slowly in the air, its massive walls glowing with an eerie blue light. "The ambassadors have been trapped inside for 3 weeks," Vorath's deep voice rumbled through the room. His species, the Vorak, were known throughout the galaxy as master strategists. "Every day we delay increases the risk to their lives." Arya leaned forward, studying the fortress. It looked ancient, with towers that reached toward the purple sky of the planet below, but what caught her attention was the main gate, a massive structure that seemed to pulse with energy. "What about the gate?" she asked, her voice cutting through the murmurs of the other officers. "Can we go through there?" Several aliens turned to look at her. A few exchanged glances that Arya had learned to recognize as skepticism. She was used to it. Humans were still newcomers to the Galactic Coalition, having joined only 5 years ago. General Vorath's expression softened slightly. He respected the human engineer's intelligence, even if her youth and inexperience showed sometimes. "Captain Chen, that gate has protected the fortress for over 300 years. It is reinforced with energy shields that regenerate faster than any weapon can damage them. Has anyone ever gotten through it?" Arya asked. "Never," Lieutenant Zix spoke up from across the table. The young Zelthian's scales shimmered green, a color that Arya had learned meant curiosity. "My grandfather studied this fortress during the last conflict. The gate is considered impossible to breach." Vorath nodded, his primary arms crossing over his chest. "Which is why we must plan for a siege. We will surround the fortress, cut off their supplies, and force them to negotiate. It will take time, perhaps 2 or 3 months, but it is the only viable strategy." Arya's heart sank. 3 months. The ambassadors were peace representatives from 7 different species, trapped when diplomatic talks had collapsed. They had food and water, but 3 months in captivity could destroy the fragile peace process the Coalition had worked so hard to build. "General," Arya said carefully, "may I ask a question about the gate's specifications?" Vorath's eyes, all 6 of them, focused on her. "Of course. How is the energy shield anchored? I mean, what generates it and where does the power flow?" The general pulled up a new display. Technical diagrams filled the air, showing complex energy patterns and structural details. Arya's engineering training kicked in immediately. She had spent 4 years studying structural dynamics at the Human Technical Institute, and another 3 working on deep space stations. "The shield is generated by 12 power nodes embedded in the gate itself," Vorath explained. "They create an interconnected web of energy that covers every centimeter of the surface. Even if you destroy one node, the others compensate instantly." Arya stood up and walked closer to the hologram, her fingers moving through the display to rotate it. The other officers watched her with varying degrees of interest and impatience. "But the gate still has physical hinges, right?" she asked. "And support structures?" "Yes, but they are protected by the same shield," Commander Drax said, his rocky features showing amusement. "I see where your thoughts go, human. Many have tried to target the weak points. The shield makes it impossible." Arya nodded slowly, but her mind was racing. She zoomed in on the hinges, then on the support beams that held the massive gate in place. Something about the energy distribution pattern looked familiar. Too familiar. "General Vorath," she said, "could I get a copy of these specifications? I'd like to study them in detail." The general's expression was kind but firm. Captain Chen, I admire your enthusiasm. Your species has brought many fresh ideas to the Coalition, but this gate has been studied by our best minds for centuries. Every approach has been tried and failed. I understand, sir, Arya replied, but maybe that's exactly why it's worth one more look. Sometimes when everyone agrees something is impossible, it just means we're all making the same assumption. Lieutenant Zix's scales flickered between green and yellow, curiosity mixed with hope. General, it would not hurt to let her examine the data. Vorath considered this for a long moment. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. Finally, he nodded. Very well. Lieutenant Zix, provide Captain Chen with full access to the fortress specifications. But understand this, Captain. We cannot delay our siege preparations while you search for miracles. I understand, sir. Thank you. As the meeting ended and the officers filed out, Arya remained behind, staring at the holographic gate. She heard footsteps and turned to find Lieutenant Zix approaching. You really think you can find something? The young alien asked, his voice hopeful. Arya smiled. I think that gate has been standing for 300 years because everyone believes it will stand for 300 more. But every structure has a breaking point, Zix. Every single one. We just need to find it. And if we do not, then we'll have lost nothing but a little time, Arya said. But if we do find it, if there's even a chance, we could save those ambassadors and avoid a 3-month siege. Zix's scales turned bright green. Then I will help you look. As Arya left the conference room with the data files downloading to her tablet, she felt the weight of what she had promised. The ambassadors were counting on them. The peace process was counting on them. And somewhere in those specifications, she was certain, was the answer they needed. Arya's quarters were small but comfortable, filled with the soft blue glow of multiple holographic displays. She had been studying the gate specifications for 6 hours straight, her eyes burning from the strain. Coffee cups, 3 of them, sat empty on her desk. A very human habit that her alien crewmates found puzzling. Lieutenant Zix had brought her dinner 2 hours ago, which sat mostly untouched. The young Zelthian had stayed to watch her work, fascinated by the way she approached the problem. You keep looking at the same sections, Zix observed, his scales shifting to a thoughtful purple color. The hinges and the support beams. Why? Arya rubbed her tired eyes and leaned back in her chair. Because everyone else has been focusing on the shield itself, trying to break through it or disable it. But the shield isn't holding the gate up. The physical structure is. But the shield protects the physical structure, Zix said, repeating what they had all been taught. It does, Arya agreed. But look at this. She pulled up a new diagram, highlighting the energy flow patterns. See how the shield's power moves through the gate? It follows specific pathways, creates specific patterns. Zix moved closer, his large eyes studying the display. I see the patterns, but I do not understand what you are showing me. Arya smiled. It was time to explain this in a way that made sense. On Earth, we have bridges, huge structures that span across water or valleys. Some of them are hundreds of years old. Do you know how they sometimes fail? They get old, damaged. Sometimes. But there's another way. Arya stood up and walked to her small shelf, picking up a glass of water. She tapped the rim gently with her finger, creating a soft ringing sound. Everything has a natural frequency, a specific vibration it resonates with. When you match that frequency with an external force, even something small can create massive effects. She tapped the glass again, this time at a slightly different rhythm. On Earth, there was a famous bridge called the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. Wind created vibrations that matched the bridge's natural frequency. The bridge started swinging, bigger and bigger, until it tore itself apart, not because the wind was strong enough to destroy it directly, but because it found the bridge's weak point. Zix's scales flashed bright green with excitement. You think the gate has a frequency like this? I think the energy shield creates a constant vibration pattern through the physical structure, Arya explained, pulling up more data. And if we can match that pattern, we might be able to create resonance. Make the gate shake itself apart from the inside. But the shield will still protect it, Zix protested, though his tone suggested he wanted to be proven wrong. Arya grinned. The shield protects against external forces trying to damage the gate. But what if the force comes from inside the structure itself? What if we make the gate want to fall apart? The young alien sat down heavily, his mind clearly racing through the implications. This is not how we think about problems. We think about strength against strength, power against power. I know, Arya said gently, and that's exactly why it might work. The Crithians built this gate to withstand direct attacks. They never considered someone might use physics against them. Zix was quiet for a moment, then asked, Can you prove this theory? I think so. We'd need to build a resonance device, something that can generate precise sonic pulses at specific intervals. Then we'd need to calculate the exact frequency of the gate's structure. Arya pulled up her calculations, showing pages of equations and wave patterns. It's complicated, but it's possible. How long would it take? To build the device? Maybe 3 days if we have the right materials? To calculate the frequency? I'd need to scan the gate up close, which means getting within a few hundred meters of the fortress. Zix's scales turned orange, the color of worry. General Vorath will never approve a close approach. It is too dangerous. Then we'll need to convince him, Arya said. But first I need to show him this can work. Do we have any materials on this ship similar to what the gate is made from? Zix thought for a moment, his scales flickering through several colors. The cargo bay has surplus hull plating from the Crithian cruiser we captured last year. It is the same composite material. Arya's face lit up. Perfect. Can you get me access to it? Yes, but what will you do? I'm going to run a test, a small-scale demonstration of what resonance can do. Arya was already moving, gathering her equipment and pulling on her work jacket. If I can show Vorath that the concept works, he might give us a chance. 2 hours later, in the ship's cargo bay, Arya and Zix had set up their experiment. A piece of Crithian hull plating stood mounted on supports, similar to how the gate's panels connected to their frame. Arya had rigged up a basic sonic emitter using parts from the ship's communication system. This seems too simple, Zix said, watching her make final adjustments. Centuries of military strategy, and you think sound waves will work. Not just any sound waves, Arya corrected. Precisely calibrated frequencies that match the material's natural resonance point. It's like finding the right key for a lock. She activated the device. At first, nothing happened. The hull plating stood solid and unmoved. Zix's scales started turning gray. Disappointment. But Arya didn't stop. She adjusted the frequency slightly, watching her readouts, then adjusted again and again. Suddenly, the plating began to vibrate, softly at first, then more visibly. The supports holding it started to shake. By the ancestors, Zix whispered, his scales flashing through rainbow colors of amazement. Arya increased the intensity slightly. The vibrations grew stronger. Small stress fractures began appearing in the plating, tiny cracks spreading from the connection points, exactly where she had predicted. She shut the device off before the plating could break completely. Both of them stared at the damaged panel, seeing the proof right in front of them. It works, Zix breathed. It actually works. Arya nodded, her heart pounding with excitement and nervousness. Now comes the hard part. What is that? Convincing a 300-year-old military general that a human engineer knows something his entire civilization missed. Zix's scales turned bright green again. When do we tell him? Tomorrow morning. And Zix? Thank you for believing in this, for believing in me. The young alien's scales shimmered warmly. You humans have a saying, yes? About thinking outside the box? Arya laughed. We do. Perhaps that is what the Coalition needs. Someone who does not know what boxes are. General Vorath stood in the cargo bay, his 6 eyes fixed on the cracked hull plating. Around him, a dozen senior officers murmured among themselves, their reactions ranging from curiosity to outright disbelief. You did this with sound? Commander Drax asked, running his rocky fingers over the stress fractures. Just vibrations? Precisely calibrated vibrations, sir, Arya explained, trying to keep her voice steady despite her nervousness. When you match the natural frequency of a material, you create resonance. The structure essentially shakes itself apart from within. Vorath circled the damaged plating slowly, his 4 arms crossed in what Arya had learned was his thinking posture. And you believe this same principle will work on the fortress gate? Yes, sir. The gate is made of similar materials. If we can scan it to determine its exact resonant frequency, we can build a device powerful enough to create the same effect on a much larger scale. The gate has stood for 300 years, one of the older officers said skeptically. It has weathered countless attacks, natural disasters, even planetary storms. Why would it suddenly fall to sound waves? Arya took a breath. This was the moment she needed to make them understand. Because all those things attacked the gate from the outside, sir. They tried to break through its defenses. What I'm proposing is different. We make the gate's own structure work against itself. Lieutenant Zix stepped forward, his scales bright green with confidence. I have checked Captain Chen's calculations. The physics are sound. If we can generate the right frequency, the gate will develop structural failures at the hinges and support beams. And the energy shield? Another officer asked. Will it not protect against this? The shield protects against external damage, Arya said. But internal structural stress from resonance? That's not something the shield was designed to stop. It's like... She searched for the right analogy. It's like having armor that protects your skin but doesn't stop your own bones from breaking. Vorath finally spoke, his voice thoughtful. How long would this take? And what would you need? Arya felt a surge of hope. He was considering it. 3 days to build the resonance device. We have most of the materials on board. But I'd need to get within scanning range of the gate, close enough to analyze its exact structural frequency. That means approaching within 300 meters of the fortress, Commander Drax said. The Crithians will see us. They might attack. We could use a stealth shuttle, Zix suggested. A small team moving at night on the planet's surface. Quick scan, then retreat. Vorath was silent for a long moment. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Finally, he turned to Arya. Captain Chen, I have commanded military operations for 70 years. I have studied tactics that are older than your entire species' spaceflight history. Everything I know tells me that sieges work because they are safe, predictable, and proven. Arya's heart sank. She prepared herself for rejection. However, Vorath continued, and hope sparked again, I have also learned that sometimes the most valuable asset is not experience, but fresh perspective. Your people have been in space for barely a century, yet you have already shown us things we never considered. He walked to the damaged plating and touched it with one massive hand. You have proven your concept works on a small scale. I will give you your chance to prove it on the gate. But understand this. I cannot risk the entire operation on an untested theory. You will have one attempt. If it fails, we proceed with the siege. Thank you, General, Arya said, relief flooding through her. We won't let you down. Lieutenant Zix, Vorath turned to the young alien. You will lead the scanning mission with Captain Chen. Take 2 security officers and the stealth shuttle. You leave at sunset on the planet below. That gives you 18 hours. Zix's scales flashed acknowledgement. Yes, sir. Commander Drax, Vorath continued, you will work with Captain Chen on building her device. She will have access to any resources she needs from our inventory. The rocky commander nodded, though his expression showed he was still skeptical. As the meeting ended and officers dispersed, Vorath gestured for Arya to remain behind. When they were alone, he sat down heavily on a cargo container, suddenly looking very tired. "Do you know why I'm allowing this?" he asked. Arya shook her head. "I hoped it was because you believe in the science, sir." "The science is sound, I can see that. But that's not the only reason." He looked at her with an expression that seemed almost sad. "I have been a soldier my entire life. I have won many sieges, fought many battles. But every siege, even when we win, costs lives, takes time, creates suffering." He gestured toward the stars visible through the bay's windows. "Those ambassadors down there, they were trying to build peace. If your method works, we save them quickly, without casualties, without months of hardship. That is worth the risk of trying something new." "I understand, sir. Do you?" Vorath stood up, his full height making him tower over her. "If you fail, those ambassadors will spend 3 more months in captivity because I delayed our siege to chase your theory. The pressure on you is enormous. Can you handle that?" Arya met his eyes, all 6 of them, without flinching. "General, I'm terrified, but I'd be more terrified of not trying. Those people down there deserve every chance we can give them." A small smile crossed Vorath's face. "That is a very human answer. Very well, Captain. Go build your miracle device. I will prepare our forces for either outcome." As Arya left the cargo bay, her mind was already racing through calculations and equipment lists. She had 18 hours to scan the gate, 3 days to build the device, and 1 chance to prove that sometimes the best way through an obstacle wasn't to fight it head-on. Sometimes you just needed to ask it nicely to fall apart. Behind her, she heard Commander Drax's grumbling voice. "Sound waves. Against a fortress gate. What's next? Defeating warships with music?" Lieutenant Zix's cheerful response made her smile. "Actually, Commander, I've been reading about human history. They have this thing called rock and roll." Despite everything, despite the pressure and the fear, Arya laughed. She had work to do. And for the first time since joining the coalition, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The planet's twin moons cast silver light across the dark landscape as the stealth shuttle descended silently. Arya gripped her scanning equipment, watching the fortress grow larger in the view screen. Even from this distance, the gate looked impossibly massive, a wall of dark metal that seemed to absorb the moonlight. "Approaching scanning range," Zix whispered, though there was no need for quiet inside the sealed shuttle. His scales had turned deep blue, the color of intense focus. The shuttle settled behind a cluster of rocks 300 meters from the fortress. Arya activated her equipment, pointing the sensors directly at the gate. Data began flowing across her screen: structural density, energy patterns, resonance frequencies. "How long?" one of the security officers asked nervously. 2 minutes, Arya replied, her eyes fixed on the readings. The numbers were dancing across her display, forming patterns she needed to memorize. "Just 2 more minutes." Those 2 minutes felt like hours. Every shadow seemed threatening. Every small sound made them jump. But finally, Arya's equipment beeped softly. "Got it," she breathed. "Let's go." The shuttle lifted off silently, disappearing into the night sky. Behind them, the fortress stood unchanged, unaware that its greatest secret had just been stolen. 3 days later, Arya stood in the engineering workshop, putting final touches on the resonance device. It looked surprisingly simple, a cylindrical generator connected to an array of sonic emitters. Commander Drax had been skeptical throughout the entire building process, but he had provided every component she requested. "It's ready," she announced to the team gathered around her. Zix's scales shimmered with excitement. Even Commander Drax looked impressed, though he tried to hide it. General Vorath entered the workshop, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Report, Captain Chen." "The device is complete, sir. The scanning data gave us the gate's exact resonant frequency. This generator will produce sonic pulses at that frequency, creating harmonic vibrations in the gate's structure." "And you're certain this will work?" Arya hesitated. Honesty was important now. "Sir, I'm certain the physics are correct. The gate will resonate. Whether the structural stress will be enough to actually bring it down, we won't know until we try." Vorath nodded appreciatively. "An honest answer. Better than false confidence." He looked at the device. "When can we deploy?" "We're ready now, sir. We just need to get within range of the gate. Then prepare your team. We move in 1 hour." The coalition forces assembled in orbit above the planet. Arya's shuttle, carrying the resonance device, would approach the fortress with a small escort. The main fleet would stay back, ready to move in once, if the gate fell. As they descended through the atmosphere, Arya's hands trembled slightly. She gripped the edge of her seat, trying to calm her racing heart. Everything she had calculated, everything she had promised, came down to this moment. "Approaching the fortress," the pilot announced. Through the view screen, Arya could see the massive structure. In daylight, it looked even more intimidating than at night. The gate stood proud and strong, exactly as it had for 300 years. General Vorath's voice crackled over the communication channel. "Captain Chen, you may proceed when ready." Arya and her team carefully unloaded the resonance device, positioning it on a clear area about 200 meters from the gate. Krithian guards had spotted them now, but they seemed confused rather than alarmed. What could a small group with strange equipment possibly do to their impenetrable fortress? Commander Drax stood beside Arya, his rocky features unreadable. Lieutenant Zix was practically vibrating with nervous energy, his scales shifting through a dozen colors. General Vorath's shuttle landed nearby. He stepped out, walking to where Arya was making final calibrations. His 6 eyes studied the gate with centuries of military experience. "You'll never break the gate," he said quietly, and for a moment Arya's heart stopped. Then she saw the slight smile on his face. It wasn't mockery. It was a challenge, an invitation for her to prove him wrong. Arya looked up at the massive structure, then back at her small device. She thought about all the military minds that had studied this gate, all the weapons that had failed against it, all the conventional wisdom that said it was impossible. "You're right, General," she said, surprising everyone around her. "I'm not going to break it." She activated the device, her finger hovering over the final initiation button. "I'm going to ask it nicely to fall apart." She pressed the button. At first, nothing happened. The device hummed softly, generating pulses that were barely audible. The gate stood unchanged. Arya watched her readouts anxiously, making sure the frequency was exactly right. Seconds passed, then a full minute. Commander Drax shifted uncomfortably. Some of the security officers exchanged doubtful glances. Even Zix's scales were starting to turn gray. But Arya kept watching the gate. She could see it in her instruments, even if others couldn't yet, microscopic vibrations building in the structure. The resonance was starting. Then, visible to everyone, the gate began to shake. Just slightly at first, a tremor that could have been mistaken for wind. But it grew stronger. The massive metal surface started to vibrate visibly. A low hum filled the air, growing louder. "By the ancestors," Vorath whispered. The hinges, those ancient connection points that had held for 3 centuries, began to glow, not from energy shields but from friction, from stress, from metal being pushed beyond its limits by its own vibrations. Cracks appeared at the support beams, small at first, then spreading like lightning across metal. The gate's own weight, combined with the harmonic vibrations, was creating exactly the structural failure Arya had predicted. The Crithian guards inside the fortress were panicking now, but there was nothing they could do. Their shields protected against external attacks. Their weapons couldn't stop physics itself. Arya increased the device's intensity slightly. The gates shaking became violent. Huge pieces of the support structure began breaking free. "It's working!" Zix shouted over the noise, his scales flashing every color imaginable. "It's actually working!" The gate groaned, a deep, tortured sound of metal failing. The hinges, glowing red-hot now, were barely holding. Arya walked forward, her team calling out in concern. But she knew what she needed to do. She had calculated every stress point, every weakness. The gate was ready to fall. It just needed one final push. She reached the base of the gate, where the main support beam connected to the ground. The structure was shaking so violently now that dust and small debris rained down around her. General Vorath watched, understanding dawning on his face. Arya pulled her leg back and kicked the weakened support beam. The ancient metal, stressed beyond all limits by harmonic resonance, shattered. The massive gate of the Crithian fortress, the impenetrable barrier that had stood for 300 years, broke free from its hinges and fell outward with a deafening crash that echoed across the entire valley. Silence followed. Then Zix let out a whoop of joy. The security officers cheered. Even Commander Drax's rocky face cracked into something resembling a smile. General Vorath walked slowly to where Arya stood, staring at the fallen gate. Dust was still settling around them. "Captain Chen," he said softly, his voice full of wonder. "I stand corrected." The dust settled slowly, revealing the open pathway into the fortress. Arya stood beside the fallen gate, her heart still pounding from the moment. Around her, the coalition forces were moving into position, but there was no need for weapons or force. The Crithian defenders inside looked too shocked to resist. General Vorath raised his hand, signaling his troops to move carefully and peacefully. "We are here for the ambassadors," he called out in the universal trade language. "We do not seek further conflict. Lower your weapons." After a moment's hesitation, the Crithian guards complied. They had seen something impossible happen. Their impenetrable gate destroyed not by superior firepower, but by understanding and physics. It had shaken their confidence completely. Within 30 minutes, the 7 ambassadors were freed. They emerged from the fortress tired and worn, but unharmed. Medical teams rushed forward to check them, while diplomats began immediate talks with the Crithian leaders. Ambassador Tavera, an elderly Zelthian diplomat, approached Arya with tears streaming down her scaled face. "Young human," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "we heard the gate fall. We thought it was an explosion, that many had died. But you did this without casualties?" "Yes, Ambassador," Arya replied, suddenly feeling exhausted. "The gate fell, but no one was hurt." Tavera embraced her in the Zelthian manner, touching foreheads gently. "You have saved more than our lives today. You have saved the peace process itself." 2 weeks later, back aboard the Unity's Promise, Arya found herself standing before the full Coalition Council. Representatives from dozens of species filled the chamber, all wanting to hear about the fortress gate. General Vorath presented the official report, but then surprised everyone by calling Arya forward. "The Coalition needs to hear this from the engineer herself," he said. Arya walked to the center of the chamber, feeling hundreds of alien eyes upon her. She took a breath and began. "For 300 years, that gate stood because everyone believed it would stand forever. Because the Crithians built it to resist every kind of attack they could imagine. But they never imagined someone would use the structure itself as the weapon." She activated a holographic display, showing the gate's energy patterns and structural design. Every wall, every barrier, every obstacle has weak points. Sometimes those weak points aren't obvious. Sometimes they're hidden in the very thing that makes the structure strong. A Vorak counselor raised a hand. Are you saying all our defenses are vulnerable? No, sir, Arya replied. I'm saying that there's always more than one way to solve a problem. The Krithians expected force against force. They never prepared for someone to think differently. Ambassador Tavera stood up, her scales shimmering silver with age and wisdom. The Council should understand what Captain Chen accomplished. She ended a potential 3-month siege in 3 days. She saved the ambassadors without a single casualty. And she did it not with weapons, but with knowledge. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Humanity has been part of our coalition for only 5 years, Tavera continued. Yet already they teach us valuable lessons. They approach problems from angles we never considered. Perhaps this is what we need more of, not just military strength but creative thinking. The Council debated for hours, but the conclusion was clear. Arya was promoted and given a new title, Coalition Innovation Advisor. Her role would be to work with all species, finding unconventional solutions to problems that seemed impossible. Months passed. Arya's small department grew, recruiting engineers and scientists from multiple species who were interested in thinking beyond traditional methods. Lieutenant Zix was her first official team member, having requested transfer immediately. One day, Arya was teaching a class to young cadets from the Coalition Academy. She stood before a mixed group of aliens, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes in the classroom. Your assignment, she told them, is to look at this defensive wall design and find 3 different ways to get through it. You cannot use weapons or force. Think creatively. A young Vorak cadet raised his hand. But instructor, there is only one obvious solution. Then you're not thinking hard enough, Arya interrupted gently. Every problem has multiple solutions. Some are just hiding better than others. After class, she found General Vorath waiting outside. The old warrior had become an unlikely friend, often visiting to discuss strategy and innovation. Walk with me, he said. They strolled through the ship's observation deck, looking out at the stars. Finally, Vorath spoke. I have been thinking about that day at the fortress, about what you said before you kicked the gate. About asking it nicely to fall apart? Arya smiled. Yes, it sounded like a joke, but it was not, was it? No, sir. It was about respect, understanding the gate's nature instead of fighting against it, working with physics instead of against it. Vorath nodded slowly. For 300 years, my people, and many others, believed that the only way through an obstacle was to be stronger than the obstacle. You showed us differently. Someone very wise on Earth once said that if you know your enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. But sometimes the enemy isn't another person. It's just a problem waiting to be understood. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Vorath said, I am retiring from military command next month. Arya looked at him in surprise. Sir? 70 years is enough. And I find that I am more interested now in building than in defending. The Council has asked me to oversee coalition infrastructure development. He smiled at her. I believe I may need an innovation advisor. I'd be honored to work with you, General. Just Vorath now. We are colleagues, not commander and subordinate. A year after the fortress gate fell, Arya stood with her team before a new project. The Coalition had commissioned them to design the first joint human-alien research facility, a place where different species could work together, sharing knowledge and perspectives. Zix presented the final design to the gathered officials. It was beautiful. A structure that incorporated architectural elements from a dozen different civilizations, creating something entirely new. Notice, Zix explained, his scales bright green with pride, that there are no walls between departments, no barriers between species workspaces. Captain Chen taught us that walls are opportunities for division. Instead, We have built bridges. Arya watched the presentation with quiet satisfaction. The fallen gate of the Crithian fortress had become a symbol throughout the coalition, not of destruction, but of new possibilities, of thinking differently. After the presentation, a young human cadet approached her, one of the first humans to graduate from the Coalition Academy. "Captain Chen," the cadet said nervously, "I want to be like you, to find solutions that others miss. But how do I learn to think that way?" Arya considered the question carefully. Start by questioning assumptions. When everyone says something is impossible, ask yourself, is it really impossible? Or are we all making the same mistake? Look for patterns others ignore. And remember, every wall has weak points. Every problem has an unconventional solution. You just have to be brave enough to find it. The cadet saluted and left, inspired. Vorath appeared beside Arya. "Another generation learning to kick down gates," he said warmly. Arya laughed. "Not literally, I hope." "No, but metaphorically, I hope very much." He gestured at the research facility design. "This is your legacy, Arya. Not just one fallen gate, but a new way of thinking spreading throughout the coalition." As Arya looked at the diverse group of species gathered together, working toward common goals, she felt a deep sense of purpose. The galaxy was full of barriers, some physical, some mental, some cultural, but every single one of them could fall if approached with the right perspective. Sometimes the best solution wasn't forcing your way through an obstacle. Sometimes you just needed to understand it well enough to ask it nicely to step aside. And sometimes, when all else failed, a well-placed kick at the right weak point could change everything. The gate had fallen, but in its place, bridges were rising,